Welcome to the Grow Your Law Firm podcast, brought to you by Pilma. This podcast helps lead lawyers to more growth, profit, and freedom. Here is your legal marketing expert and host, Ken Hardison.
Hi, this is Gracie Howes with Pilma. Let's hit pause for just a second on this episode because I have to tell you about this event that every forward-thinking PI firm should have on their calendar this January. It's the AI for PI Expo in Orlando, Florida, January 15th through 17th. This is the very first conference of its kind dedicated entirely to showing personal injury firms how to harness AI to save time, cut costs, and grow faster. You'll get hands-on demos, practical training, and access to the best AI solutions built for law firms. Reserve your spot now at pilma.org/AI for PI Expo via the link in the show notes.
Well, hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of Grow Your Law Firm. And today we have the honor and privilege of having Seth Deutsch with Samson Partners. Thank you for being here today, Seth.
It's a pleasure, Ken. Thank you for having me.
Yeah. So I'm excited about today's show because we're going to get into what I think are some real hot issues that are going on around. Whether you know it or not, there's a lot of buzzing and there's a lot of action going on in the PI industry. And if you don't know it, you need to be aware of it. Whether you intend to participate or not, you still need to know what's going on to help guide you in running your firm and growing your law firm. So I appreciate you taking time from your busy schedule, Seth, to do this.
Anytime for you, Ken. Anytime.
No, I appreciate it. So tell them about Samson Partners Group, and then let's get into. I want to know what's going on with this institutional money and what's going on with consolidation, different things.
Sure. Yeah. So a little bit of just about our firm. We've been around about 5 years now, but I'm I'm still a CEO of my own company, which I forget. I've always been. I come from humble roots, and I certainly didn't start my career in business. I started it as a basketball coach, but that was a long time ago. We exist to help founders who have decided, for whatever reason, that they want to either exit their company or to somehow participate with outside investors to grow their business. We help them do that. And we don't just do it in law. We've been working in the legal industry now for just about 3.5, 4 years. But we do this across multiple industries: architecture, engineering, construction, what we call the blue collar trade. So think about like anything at your house or business that needs a wrench. Again, some person in a truck coming up with a wrench and some parts to fix it. We also do it in the finance, accounting, and CPA world, and now we do it in the legal ecosystem. So we help founders do that. And this really came from years spent partnering with private equity firms to help them acquire, transform, and monetize assets. We've worked with over 200 private equity firms in our career, me and my team, about 15 people. I have been the largest professional services company that I ran as a CEO at scale. When I started, it was $25 million of revenue. When I was done, it was a $2 billion enterprise with 10,000 employees in 80 countries. And so, everything we do, we have done as executives. We've been in the founder's seat. I still am in the founder's seat. And so what we do, our mission is to bring all of those decades of experience, not just me, but my entire team, of working on the other side to the founder. And this mission really started for me and for our team a few years ago. I've been doing this so long that I've sat across from many, many founders of what I consider smaller businesses, let's say under 30 million in revenue. And this could be in the restoration industry or engineering or, construction, whatever it might be, who didn't get good advice before selling their business. And I've sat across from many, many founders who had poured their heart and soul into a business. And when they decided to sell, the people that were representing them weren't necessarily honest with them, didn't tell them what might happen if they didn't do certain things to the business. So we actually wrote a book on this. It's available on Amazon. It's called The Owner's Manual: Why, When, and How to Sell Your Business to Private Equity. And this book actually has 25 interviews, not just my words, but words. We got some lawyers in here too, words from other founders that have been through this journey that are sharing what they wish they would have known before they went to sell their business. And the analogy that we use here, it's kind of like, if I'm sitting here in a suburb, well, not a suburb, but a part of Chicago, there's a trade range for an investment property where I'm sitting right now. And let's say that's between 300 and 600 a square foot. Well, I'm not allowed to pretend that this home I'm sitting in is in Newport Beach or Aspen, where it sells for 3,000 a foot, right? So there's a known range. And, within that range, because there was a unit that just sold right over there, right? I can say, when I take a look at location, my foundation, my landscaping, the age of my roof, the quality of my fixtures, the age of my kitchen appliances, last time I put a fresh coat of paint on the joint, right? There's a range where I'm going to fall within that, and I've got a decision to make. Do I want to remodel the house before I go to market or sell it as is? Well, that's going to take time and money, but I can make those trade-offs. When we take a look at a business, it's the same thing. There's a trade range for every business out there. And when you take a look at things like succession and leadership and key man risk and client concentration and quality of your financials and quality of your technology and quality of your operations, all these things, they add up to tell you not only in the world of investors where that business might sell, what the valuation would be, but valuation's not everything. It's not like selling a house where one and done, you're gone, right? How long are you going to have to stay? What might that deal structure look like? How much is going to be cash? How much might be in a seller's note? How much might be in an earnout? How much you're going to have to roll over? How long are you going to have to be employed on the other side? Because you're no longer going to be an owner. You might have some equity in it, but you're going to be an operator in that business. So we help founders understand this, and we started helping founders of law firms think through this and execute strategies here, like I said, just about 3.5 years ago. And now we've worked with dozens of owners of law firms across 8 sectors of law to understand what's happening and to make and execute plans. So I'll pause there, Ken.
So I know you get asked this at least 100 times a day, or a majority of the time, because I get asked this a lot from lawyers. So how do I determine what my law firm's worth? That is the $64,000 question.
Listen, it's hard. And the thing is, it's art and science. It's art and science. And here's the truth. And the issue is that in the private markets, what we're often relying on is something called pitch book, which a lot of founders in your industry probably have never heard of. So pitch book it's expensive to access. A lot of the high quality investment bankers have access to it. We have access to it. We have an investment bank as well. But it's recording private transactions where there has been SEC reporting, because many large private equity firms have to report to the SEC in their disclosures and for tax purposes, et cetera. And so we're able to see in private transactions what are these businesses actually selling for. The issue in legal is that not many of them have tripped that threshold. Many of them are done as sidecar investments, perhaps outside the fund. Many of them are done as minority investments so far. But there's a lot happening. There have been this year probably about 7 deals. It's less than people think, because there are a lot of private transactions occurring. There are a lot of off-market, off-balance sheet, private credit coming in. But, there have been institutionally probably 5 major deals done this year across the smaller scale and with private credit and all these things, probably about 30. Next year, we're going to see probably 40 transactions done between institutional private equity and the legal industry, but very, very few of these are going to be reported. And so we understand what's going on. And so what is a firm worth? Well, I always answer with this: a firm is worth what someone is willing to pay, which And so we've got different sectors of legal. Obviously, this podcast is more for people within, let's say, the personal injury law firm space.
Yeah. Yeah.
What I can tell you today, in today's market, depending on a whole host of things, in my opinion, the trade range is anywhere between 3 times earnings. Now, what we actually mean by earnings is a whole other thing. I could spend 2 hours
EBITDA.
EBITDA. What does EBITDA actually mean? How do you calculate it? What is adjusted EBITDA? How do you factor in compensation? Because guess what, folks? You're no longer going to be taking distributions. You're now going to have a salary and all this other stuff. So I can safely say, listen, there are going to be outliers on either end of this range that today, personal injury law firms, if they are transactable, are typically going to transact somewhere between 3 times and let's say 6 times earnings. That's the range. That's a big spread, right? That's a big spread. Now, does that mean, are there going to be certain deals that are going to happen that are more than that? Sure. Are there going to be certain deals that are going to happen for less than that? Sure. Then you get into transaction structure, right? How much cash might you be getting at close? How much might be on the come in terms of a seller note or an earnout? And then how much are you going to be required, if any, to, roll over, right, and still be an owner, right, on the other side of the transaction? But that's a safe range today. I know of things that are going for more. I know of things that are going for less, but that's kind of the relative range at this stage in the evolution of the space. Now, it's different if you're an estate planning firm. It's different if you're in family law. It's different if you're in consumer bankruptcy or consumer credit. It's different if you're in consumer property tax. It's different if you're a general corporate law firm. And then in that space, are you an AM 100 law firm, one of the top 10 or top 100 largest firms with over $1 billion in revenue in the United States? Or are you a boutique IP law firm or real estate law firm or M&A law firm, right? So the ranges are all in deal structures all over the place. That 3 to 6 times, that safe zone that I'm sharing there with you, that I can credibly say that's about the market today. And there are exceptions on both sides. That's what we're seeing in today's PI space.
And I know what's going through my mind, I know it's going through our listeners or our viewers' mind is, okay, what's the difference in a 3 times and a 6 times?
Sure.
What makes it so much more valuable? Twice
Sure.
as much.
Yeah, so, this is a sentiment that we share really with any business owner. And again, these are things that we cover in this book. And by the way, for your listeners, we are going to be coming out with a supplement to this soon, specifically for the personal injury market. But I ask
Right.
everyone to read this first because this anchors you in this across all industries in the United States, right? So when investors are looking at a business, any business, the first thing they are asking themselves, right? Because you think about what are they buying? They are buying the future cash flows of that business, right? So
Right.
the predictability of future cash flow, in a way, is what determines the value of a firm. Now, private equity goes all the way back to the 1940s. There's a prominent family here in Chicago that really kind of started the category. They were the first ever family to get a loan to buy a business from a bank, debt to buy a business, where they did not have to secure that business with a personal guarantee, land, gold, property. It was just based off of the promise that that business would continue to generate cash flow in the future, right? So when we think about, the major things within a personal injury law firm, listen, the first is size, right? So size matters because the bigger you, especially in PI, the bigger you are, right? Let's say you're handling 5,000 matters a year. Well, if you lose one client or 5% of your clients, right? Guess what? You're going to be okay. That's not going to sink the ship. If you're 100 or 300 files a year, that's a little dicier, right? So that the predictability, right, of that is a little dicier. The next question, and we've got some fun answers for investors, let me tell you. We spent a good yarn. The next thing is brand, right? So Well, we try to get investors to understand, institutional investors to understand in this space, and brand and key man risk. These things are tied together, and your listeners already know about themselves, right? So, but this is part of how we also educate the market. The firms that are bigger are going to trade for more. The firms that have very well established brands, and we can really prove that the cases are coming in not because of an individual or a lawyer, right? But because of the brand and the sophistication of marketing. And then within marketing, as your listeners know, we have branded marketing, we have white label, right? If your brand has reached a point of saturation or whatever, and you're going to white label, that's fine. Institutional investors, they want to understand these things. But the extent to which, and your listeners know this, right? That you've got a well defended, well regarded brand that's been around for decades. The extent to which that, now listen, if your picture is still up there, we can deal with these things, right? But the extent to which a certain brand is no longer using the picture of the founder, but now just the brand as the picture, right? Or perhaps some of the other attorneys or other people in the business other than just you on the billboard, et cetera, right, helps. But the establishment of the brand, the track record of the brand, and showing also that you've not reached a point that brand still has room to grow, right, in the market matters. And so the fact that, like, as you then prove out, we work with a number of founders who have not tried a case in over a decade, right? And they've actually, but beyond that, then the question is, well, okay, you haven't worked on a case in a long time, but are you still the one running the firm, right? Are you still managing intake, managing marketing, managing client support and customer, or like, client care? Are you still involved in, if you are a litigation, right? If part of what you do is litigation, because as we know, there are different types of firms here. There are settlement shop, settlement referral shop, settlement lit shop, like all variations, right? But like, are you still involved in case strat? So like, to what extent as the founder, right, are you still involved in, let's say, the day-to-day operations, or have you actually hired, let's say, a president or CEO from outside the business? You've, let's say, moved yourself to chairman, or you are playing more of that like visionary role, but the day-to-day operations across all the functions are handled by someone else. This separation from the business also determines not only valuation, but deal structure, right?
Yeah. The less you are dependent on, the more you can get for the company.
Yes. And then within bands, right? So let's say we're dealing with a firm that's $1 million to $5 million of post compensation adjusted EBITDA. We'll get into all that. But like, okay, like a firm like that is still going to have a band, right, of valuation versus if you are 40 to 75 million of EBITDA, you're just because of your size, you're worth more. Okay. But yes, within these relative bands, the less the firm is dependent on you, and we have ways to prove this to investors, right? You can't fake it, guys. They're or girls. They're going to come in, they're going to walk through the halls, right? They're going to figure it like you can't just put lipstick on the pig if it's not true. It doesn't mean you're transactable. And valuation is only one aspect of this. The deal structure is the other, right?
Very
But
important.
so that's a big thing. And then when we get into all the things that you all already know, and we're going to be coming out with a list of the things in personal injury that go beyond what you've been learning in masterminds and peer groups, beyond just running a firm effectively for you as a founder. Again, when the outside investor comes in, they're thinking about what happens. There's the positive view of this. What happens if you hit the Powerball, Ken? You might not be so motivated to stick around. There's also what we call the negative version of that is what happens if you get hit by a bus. This
Yeah.
is what they're asking themselves, right? If that were to happen, how dependent is the business on you? And but then the way that we can also show that it's not, and then anyone else, right, is when we start to break down a PI law firm, we start to take a look at marketing, we start to take a look at intake, we then start to take a look at how you operate. Because I always say that PI law firms are like snowflakes from the outside, from far away, they all look the same, but you get up close and the intricacy, right? They are all engineered differently based off of state and right how, the rules of that state, the rules of that jurisdiction,
Right.
the founder's mentality, and how you have figured out your special way to serve your clients and maximize profit, et cetera, your characteristics as a founder and as a founding team. So they're all a bit unique. But as they start to go through and take a look at, who's handling technology, who's handling marketing, who's handling intake, who's handling the processing of matters, who's handling, managing the lawyers, et cetera. They're also looking at who's your CFO, who's your COO. They're taking a look at the rest of the team. They're also looking at that team and saying, how long are they going to be here? Right? Like, how much longer, how much gas does that tank, the critical people in that organization? So they're looking beyond you. Now they're starting to take a look at the rest of your team. A lot of founders have been, deploying things like EOS, Rockefeller Habits into the business. These are right, or coaching, Ken, from yourself or others. Right. And so the more that they can also see that the team is running independently, that we've put in accountability, that we've put in KPIs, these are all very good things. But the extent to which these folks are making decisions independently, really owning a P&L, right, is important. And then how much gas they have in the tank. Then they start to take a look at your tech stack, right, as we come down here, because some people have developed their own technology, but the tech stacks in this universe, pretty well known, right? And pretty well established. They're also starting to take a look at layering in AI and all that other stuff that's coming. But they're really taking a look at as well, like what's not only like there's the focus certainly on, CAC, conversion, right? Quality of intake, and then it's how are you working matters. Not only like, your marketing is going up, you're able to attract, right, and develop new clients, you're bringing on more than you're settling, but then how are you doing at your average settlement? Is it going up? Is it going down? To what extent is it dependent on just, let's say, a few cases, right? Just let's say the big cases. Are those cases repeatable? So they're going to be taking a look at your past inventory in every case and how they've settled, but they also want to understand, are you getting wiser, not only on the clients that you're taking on, but how to work matters? Because here's what they know. Here's what investors in this space know. As more and more private equity and more investment comes into this industry, as there is more competition, guess what? The cost of cases is going to go up. And so you have to be able to say that to maintain margin, we're going to have to prove that you're already getting more efficient, but that there's more opportunity to gain efficiency, which you can do with your partner, right, on the back end. So they're looking at all of these characteristics. So I've just spewed off like 10 different things.
I know.
This is why
I know. There's a lot to it.
There's art and science
Yeah.
to this.
What you're saying is true, because like in our masterminds, we've made a change in the last year. Is that, we used to say, try to keep your associates under 20% of your gross, your staff under 20%, and then your marketing anywhere between 15 and 30. It depends on where you're at, what the market is. But now we're telling them with offshore and with AI, we've got to compress this and get this down total. Instead of 40, we need to get it down to 30 or below, because kids, you're going to have to spend more money, because there's not more and more wrecks every day, but there's more and more competition.
And some of it's already started, and this has already started to happen with ABSs and things of that nature. So I think this is the thing that, like, a lot of PI attorneys have already been experiencing this, right? Because some of the first ABSs that were launched, which are competing nationally, like many of the folks that are listening to this, right, have already, like, their competition is no longer what it used to be. It's no longer just the people in your zip code or your DMA. You're getting competition from off-label. You're getting competition from ABSs, right? So you're already adapting to this. And the way that we really start to think about it is as like return on invested marketing dollar. This is kind of what, private equity is looking at this, and they're saying, okay, for every dollar that you spend, what's the dollar that you kick out? And, we're seeing ratios anywhere from, 4.5 to $6.5, right, of yield.
I've always shot for 6, but
Yeah,
I think
and six is great, right? And so here's the thing, private equity is pretty sophisticated. They've been looking at this space longer than you think. And so, like, what they're trying to understand is like, well, where are you? Like, show us your ROIC on marketing. And then what they want to see is that, like, and this might be a reason to partner with private equity. Like, what are the things that you could do to
yeah.
maintain that, to expand it? Let's say if you're at a 4.5, how do you go to 5.5? And you're like, well, we need to invest in this type of technology and this type of offshoring, and we could use help to do that. Listen, that's a great reason to think about, right, partnering with
I got
private
a question because I know people out there thinking, but other than ABS though, and that's in Arizona and Puerto Rico, and maybe they're doing some
Yeah.
sandboxes, a couple other places. How can a non-lawyer invest in your law firm?
Yeah, everyone's probably started to see a lot of press on this. I was just speaking at a conference last week or the week before in Arizona, and then there were a lot of the next day at Business of Law. A lot of folks were starting to talk about MSOs, right? So what we call a managed service organization. So you're going to see from one of my collaborators, and if she listens to this logo, that's the Ohio State University. Trisha, I just want you to like, I've got Ohio State all over. Now, I played basketball at a small school called Rice University in Houston. I married into the Buckeye thing, but I'm from Ohio. Now, I just know, Ken, half of the people listening to this are never going to call me to support them, but because of my affiliation with the Buckeyes. But
Hey, you're number
but
one. You're number one in football right now.
right, right. But Trisha Rich from Holland and Knight, Josh Port over there, they're about to put out a really interesting white paper. It might be out by the time this airs. MSOs have been happening very quietly in the legal industry in the United States since the early 2000s. Very quietly. They've been happening in Texas for a long time and pervasively in Texas.
But what is a MSO for those
I'll
that don't?
explain. Basically, at the highest level, and this exists in dental, medical, ophthalmology, radiology. This exists in the CPA space. Any industry where you have what I basically call the ethical line that cannot be crossed by an investor, we create an MSO structure. And so let me give you an example. Well, let me say what an MSO is and then give you some examples. An MSO is basically where you take the lawyers and you leave them in an LLP, and you take everything else and you put that into let's say an LLC, a managed services organization. So this is now your brand. Every single other employee other than your lawyers, management of your marketing, management of your IT, all your IT assets, everything else comes over into this management service organization. And then you are selling these services, you are leasing these services, this infrastructure back to the law firm. At its highest level, what an MSO is. Many of the people listening to this have already started to do this in some way, or already doing it. I know a number of personal injury law firm owners who have already carved out, let's say, their medical records collection business and are selling that to themselves and to others, or their marketing organization, and they're selling that capability to themselves and to others. That is, in essence, an MSO. In this case, we're taking that to the nth degree. We're taking everything and bundling it into one package and then selling that service back to the law firm. That's what an MSO is at the highest level. Now, what we have to do is we have to make sure, and I'm not a lawyer and I'm not an ethicist, I'm a business person that has been asked to come into this industry to help founders understand what investors want and how to position their firms to make them investor ready. And then if we need to help them transact, we also have an investment bank, right? So I'm not, we've worked with a lot of founders, but in every case, right, we're bringing in lawyers who do the structuring, and we're partnering with legal ethicists like Lucian Pera, Trishan Rich. There are a number of them who are exceptional across the country that basically say when you create that you are not violating 5.4, that you are not fee sharing in any way. This is not what we do. This is what the other people in the industry do. So when you set up the MSO, right, I'm sitting there with an owner of a personal injury law firm. There are typically a number of people in the room with us together. It's going to be us helping them think through this. It's going to be a lawyer that's going to have to draw up the papers and separate, the entities. It's going to be a legal ethicist, and it's going to be a third-party valuation expert together collectively that are thinking through these things to make sure that we are doing this properly and ethically, right? And so that's why we formed the Private Equity Legal Alliance with some of the leading service providers in this industry. We can't help a founder do this alone. It's not our place. It's not our expertise. We can help founders understand valuation, what it takes to prepare, help them partner with the right investors. But it takes this whole community to do this. And this has been going on in the legal industry for a long time. It's been going on in other sectors for a long time. So like in dental, you cannot tell, or ophthalmology or anesthesia or radiology. When we do this separation in dental, it's called a DSO, Dental Service Organization. It'll be in our white paper that's coming out soon. These have been going on since the late 80s. They got real traction in the early 2000s. Today, in the United States, about 13% of all dental practices are owned by private equity through a DSO structure. So this is another really important thing that we say to people. If you don't want to be a part of having an outside investor or private equity, by gosh, you don't have to be. Take a look at dental, right? Like here we are almost 26 years later, about 13% of the industry participates in it. That's fine, right? This is for some people, it's not for others. But it's an option. In that option, what the investor can't tell the dentist is how to practice dentistry. The investor can't come in and say, you know what? If Ken comes in here with a toothache, you can't just say, Ken, we got to do an implant. That'll be 2,000. We got to extract that tooth. That'll be two grand at 65% gross margin. If the right thing to do is to just, patch the cavity for $200 at 35% gross, right? The investor cannot influence the practice of medicine, the practice of dentistry, the practice of anesthesia. In the world of CPA, the investor cannot tell the auditor or the tax professional how to weigh in on an opinion on an audit report or a restatement, right? They're not allowed to do that. And in here, right, we cannot share fees, and we cannot tell the lawyer how to practice law. And so anyway, MSOs have been happening very quietly for a long time in the United States. There's a long track record of this. It's been spoken about. Like I said, Trisha's about to publish a really interesting white paper on the history, the documented history of MSOs in the United States. The first client we worked with was in Canada. These are widespread in Canada in the legal industry, have been since 2003. It is just that now what has happened, all that's changed, Ken, is that institutional investors, as they were thinking about what is the next professional services arena that we want to go into, because the CPA space, that was not a thing. The first outside investment in the CPA market happened just in 2001. Here we are about 5 years later, and now 1/3 of the top 30 accounting firms in the United States have outside capital investment. Happened pretty quickly. And so now, is this going to follow the CPA space? We don't know. Is it going to look more like dental? No one knows. No one's got a crystal ball. It's just that it's happening. And private equity investors started to become aware of it. We were kind of part of that because we helped, do this for the first time in personal injury in the United States a number of years ago. It was us with a client, Alpine with Briefly, VSS with SNA in Texas in a different segment of law. So we've been doing this for a long time. And because I am a former, I've run and scaled and sold businesses for private equity, and we've worked with over 200 of them. We've been a big proponent of this, as have others. And so what's happened is the industry's taking notice of this, and they're like, holy smokes.
Okay, I got a question.
Yeah.
Why would a lawyer choose, and there's reasons for both, I'm sure, but I'm sure you know this a lot better than I do. Why would you choose MSO versus just selling out?
Well, so let's talk about this. So if you're dealing with a non-lawyer that wants to buy the firm, you're either going to do that through an ABS or an MSO or a hybrid. We've constructed hybrids of them. We see retiring founder deals all the time. If it involves someone else, capital from someone else other than a lawyer, you're either going to do it through an ABS structure, an MSO structure, or a hybrid of an ABS or an MSO, right? So
Okay, I got you.
the reason I think what's interesting at this moment in time, and it's something that like we are quite passionate about, you know, this industry was doing this for a long time before me and others came along, right? I didn't know, because it's not something that I ever looked at. It's not, and I wasn't, and it's kind of like what's happening with private equity. I had never, I didn't know about the rules and restrictions. I'm still learning about them. It's complicated. It's complicated hornet's nest, right? So anyway, but almost every other industry in the United States, founders have this option of taking on outside investor or capital from outside investors.
Yeah.
Now it is becoming much more pervasive in this industry. And so all that I would say is, if you were to go back, rewind the clock 3 years, if you were a founder of a personal injury law firm with, just going to make it up, 5 million of EBITDA, here were your options. Shut it down, sell it to a competing law firm for whatever they might pay, transfer it to your children if they happen to be of age and interested, or maybe sell it to your employees, right? These were the options. And Ken, you could probably tell me better than most, what would someone pay for a retiring founder law firm with 5 million of EBITDA? What would the deal structure and the valuation look like 3 years ago in the United States?
One or two things, they want to look at your case inventory and they're just buying the case inventory at a discount.
Right.
Or what I saw 10 or 15 years ago was basically you look at you look at the average of the last 3 years and whether it's going up or going down, and you pay them gross for 1 year, which is 3 times the EBITDA, right? Basically, I mean, close.
Yeah.
I mean, the lower end. But the problem was 10, 15 years ago, there was no money available.
Exactly.
But now you can either, and this is what I want to ask you about this, because I mean, if I got a law firm that wants to sell out and you can work it out and it's a good deal, being the structure, what you said is more, I think it's more important than the price. But if I can get,
it is.
I can get an SBA loan for 75% and get the seller to take a second for 25%. I can buy a law firm for nothing. I mean, I'm on debt. Listen, I've got debt, but what far as out of pocket money, but I got to buy a good firm. I can't buy, a pig in a boat. But if I could go out and build, and that's a great way to build a big law firm fast, if you could do it that way. I mean, I don't know if you've seen anybody do that, but to me, it just hit me.
We're starting to see it. And this exists in other industry. In my world, Ken, we call this entrepreneurship through acquisition.
That's me. That's what I think. But
yep. And so actually business schools now teach this. It's taught at Harvard. There's a whole track for young people that want to go get an SBA loan, right? And we used to call them search funders, right? So they're out independently looking for a founder to sell them their business. And so there's a whole ecosystem that supports this. And so it's just to say that now, as this is coming into the consciousness of many investors, whether they be search funders, institutional investors, and people are really starting to realize, especially personal injury law firms and other sectors of consumer law, these are fantastic businesses. And what I'm excited for personally for the founders is that now the options that you have, if for some reason you have decided you want to retire, if for some reason you've decided, you know what, I want to be a platform and go be the person that goes and acquires other law firms. I want to be the guy.
yeah.
Or you've decided, hey, this is happening. These guys keep talking about like this second, third bite at the apple thing in private equity, right? I want to be I don't want to be the person, but I want to be a node in that hub and spoke model.
I mean, there's great
whatever it is. I'm so excited for founders now that this option exists, because to me, it should have, like, this is it's a fantastic thing. We're still in the very early days.
When I sold my first law firm, I sold it in 2010. and you could not get a loan from a bank. You couldn't get an SBA loan. Nobody would loan you because they couldn't foreclose it at the store, at the courthouse steps. There was nothing to sell, right? And so the only way you could do it is you had to go borrow money on your real estate or whatever.
Exactly.
You know what I'm saying? And which made it very hard. I mean, I sold it and financed 90% of it, 95% of it to one of my partners. And it worked out great for me. And I financed it way longer than most people would have. But I had something else I wanted to do. And to me, I would have got a hell of a lot more for it if I was selling it now. You know what I'm saying?
Absolutely.
Probably twice.
I agree.
I mean, you know, and but that's the way things are. You got to take what you got at the time and deal with it and adapt and go. But I see this as excited for the founders, but I'm also excited for lawyers that are wanting to really grow, because we've got some of the masterminds, they won't own the world. I mean, let's be honest with you.
I agree. I'm excited for them as well. And you said two things that are really important, and this is where we lend a hand a lot, because I will tell you that pretty much every investor that's looking at the space right now, we've already worked with in other industries, whether it be in HVAC, refrigeration,
right,
parts distribution, engineering, accounting, construction, environmental services. It's all the same people that our team has worked with before. And so there are two things that are really, really important here. The deal structure is just as important, if not more important, than the headline price. And if you are staying with this and wanting to really go grow this thing, who you partner with matters. We write about it in here to a certain extent, but just to give you context, there's a gentleman, one of my mentors, Richard Lappin, who was the first ever guy like me, CEO that went to work with private equity in 2002. He went to work for Blackstone. They were the largest private equity firm in the United States. They had 8 billion under management. Today, and there were 150 personal injury law firm or personal injury, 150 private equity firms in the United States. Today, there are 6,000 private equity firms in the just in the United States. Trillions under management. There are probably 500 with at least 8 billion under management, some much, much more than that. And so if you think about that, the spread for a founder, I know founders that literally there was a deal I was just involved in advising a founder. There were literally 150 firms that looked at the deal book. 150, right? So now you don't have to take meetings. You are not taking meetings with 150, but let's say you're taking meetings with 10, right? How do you discern who to partner with here? And the thing is, like, this is kind of like, I make a lot of bad jokes. Here comes another one in a way, but it's like, this is kind of like old-fashioned marriage. This is kind of like till death do you part. If you have to buy the thing back, then that's a horrible outcome. This is really, you got to think about this as your partner for, let's say, the next 4 to 7 years. You guys are going to be in the trenches together, realizing the vision that you've set out. And so who you decide to marry, this is just as important as picking your spouse. I'm telling you, like, do not take this decision lightly.
Well, listen, we've run over time, but it's just, to me, this is so important. And you seem to know more about it than anybody I've talked to in the last 2 years. So thank you for taking your time.
Anytime.
Somebody, the book again is
The Owner's Manual: Why, When, and How to Sell Your Business to Private Equity. Now, as I meant, this is on Amazon. It's on our website, samsonpartnersgroup.com. If anyone has any questions, you can find me on LinkedIn. You can go to the website, submit a contact form, get in touch with Ken. Ken will tell you. I get on, he'll probably give you my cell phone. Don't give it out here, but Ken will I'm happy to, we are here to help in any way we can. And Ken, if you need us to spend more time doing another one of these, if you need us to come speak anywhere, my friend, we are there. We are here to help founders. It's why we're doing this. And I love that you're bringing this information to the industry.
Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you, sir.
Until next time, this is Ken Hardison, dedicated to your success.
You have been listening to the Grow Your Law Firm podcast, the podcast that leads lawyers to more growth, profit, and freedom. Go to growyourlawfirm.com to find more ways to market and manage your law firm. Please leave us a rating and review wherever you listen to your podcasts.